Every tragedy has a beginning, but the tragedy of Athena begins before the sun was ever given a name. To understand the goddess of wisdom, we must first understand the skull from which she climbed. Imagine Zeus, the king of the gods, the undisputed sovereign of the cosmos, a man whose throne was built on the bones of his own father. Zeus lived in a state of constant, paralyzing paranoia. He was haunted by a single prophecy that a child would be born, a child greater than him, a child who would one day cast him into the same dark abyss where he had left the Titans. His first wife, Metis, was the personification of wisdom itself. She was pregnant, she was powerful, and Zeus was terrified. He did not cast her out. He did not divorce her. He did something far more horrific. He tricked her, he lured her close, and then he swallowed her whole. Zeus believed he had won. He believed that by consuming wisdom, he had mastered it. But wisdom is not a meal, and it is not so easily digested. In the high, echoing halls of Olympus, a headache began to take root in the mind of the king. It wasn't a dull ache, it was a tectonic shift. It was the sound of 1,000 spears clashing against bronze inside his own brain. Hephaestus, the god of the forge, was summoned. He swung his double-headed axe with all the strength of the earth, and he split the skull of the king of the gods wide open. Out of the blood and the fire, she emerged. Athena did not cry. She did not stumble. She sprang forth fully grown, draped in heavy bronze armor, brandishing a spear that pulsed with divine light, and she let out a war cry that made the foundations of the world tremble. She was the perfect daughter, but look closer at that perfection. In the 2026 lens of power, we see Athena for what she truly was. She was a biological anomaly, a woman born without a mother, born directly from the mind of a patriarch. She was the ultimate enforcer of the status quo, while other gods like Dionysus represented the wild, untamed corners of the human soul, or Aphrodite represented the messy, irrational heat of desire. Athena represented order, but not the order of peace, the order of the cage. Think about the symbols she carries. Look at the owl, not as a symbol of cute intelligence, but as the bird that sees in the dark, the silent predator that strikes when its prey is most vulnerable. Look at the spear, designed for the calculated surgical strike, and most importantly, look at the aegis, the shield adorned with the severed head of Medusa. It is a grim trophy, a constant frozen scream in bronze. It is a reminder that Athena's wisdom is built upon the broken bodies of those she deemed disorderly. She is a statue that thinks, and as many in the ancient world discovered, there is nothing more dangerous than a statue with the power to judge you. Why are we starting this documentary series with her? Because Athena is the invisible hand behind almost every tragedy we have explored. When we looked at Medusa, we saw a girl whose life was shattered by a goddess's coldness. When we move to Arachne, we will see a girl whose life was ended by a goddess's jealousy. Athena is the gold standard against which all mortals are measured, and it is a standard designed for us to fail. It represents the institution, the establishment, the power that says, you may be talented, you may be beautiful, but you will never, ever be me.
But as we descend now from the golden, freezing heights of Olympus, down into the warm, dusty, purple-stained workshops of Lydia, we find a different kind of power. A power that doesn't come from a god's skull, but from a human's hands. A young woman named Arachne is currently picking up her first threads. She is about to do something no one in history had ever dared. She is about to tell the truth. Before we enter her workshop, I want you to look at your own life. Who is the Athena in your world? Is it a system, a boss, a standard you can never reach? Hold that thought, because what Arachne does next is the ultimate act of defiance. This is the beginning of the end. This is the tragedy of Arachne.
To understand the fall of Arachne, we must first understand the ground she walked upon. Leave the sterile, unmoving marble of Olympus behind, descend through the heavy clouds, past the rugged, wind-whipped peaks of Mount Sipylus, and into the golden, sun-drenched valley of Lydia. In the ancient world, Lydia was a place of sensory overload. The air here doesn't smell of cold incense or burnt offerings. It smells of cedar wood, of raw lanolin-heavy wool, and the sharp metallic tang of boiling dyes that stained the very air purple. This was the kingdom of the murex snail. This was the home of the famous Tyrian purple, a color so rare and so expensive that it was worth its weight in gold. In the heart of a bustling workshop in the city of Colophon lived a man named Idmon. He was not a king, he was not a priest, he was a dyer, a man whose life was spent elbow-deep in the boiling vats, his hands permanently stained the color of dried blood. And in the shadow of those vats, in the steam and the heat, grew his daughter, Arachne. Thump, clack, thump, clack. Arachne was not born with a silver spoon, but she was born with a gift that defied her humble surroundings. Imagine her at the warp-weighted loom, a massive frame of ancient oak leaning against a stone wall, its threads hanging like the strings of a giant harp. Watch her hands. The poets of the time, men who had seen the wonders of the world, struggled to find the words. They said her fingers moved like a blur, a rhythmic, hypnotic dance that seemed to bypass the laws of physics. She would take raw wool, dull, gray, and tangled, and with a flick of her wrist, she would spin it into a thread so fine it was invisible to the naked eye. She wasn't just making clothing, she was weaving reality. The nymphs, the spirits of the mountains and the silver-streamed rivers, were said to leave their sacred groves just to stand in her doorway. They would forget their divine nature, standing breathless as she turned a blank warp into a window to another world. Under her touch, silk became running water, wool became the soft belly of a cloud, thread became the very breath of life itself. But excellence is a dangerous thing in a world ruled by insecure gods. As Arachne's celebrity spread across the Mediterranean, from the islands to the coasts of Troy, a whisper began to fester in the crowds that gathered to watch her. Surely Athena herself must have taught her, they would mutter. Surely no mortal hand could do this without a goddess guiding the needle. To any other Greek girl, this would have been a shield, a compliment, a way to stay safe. But to Arachne, it was a theft of her soul. She thought of the years of back-breaking labor. She thought of the thousands of nights spent by the dim, flickering light of an oil lamp, her eyes aching, her back bent, her fingers scarred and calloused from the rough hemp.
The world wanted to take all of her sacrifice, all of her genius, and hand it over to a goddess who had never once felt the sting of a needle or the heat of a dye vat. To Arachne, her response was her first act of true rebellion. She did not just deny Athena's help, she disowned it. She turned away from her loom, looked directly at the crowd, and by extension, looked directly at the heights of Olympus. "Let the goddess come," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Let her match her skill against mine. If I lose, I pay the price. But why does she stay in the clouds? Why is the great Athena afraid of a dyer's daughter?" The air in the workshop didn't just change, it curdled. The warmth of the Lydian sun vanished, replaced by a cold, metallic chill that tasted like iron on the tongue. Out of the shadows of the doorway, an old woman appeared. She was bent nearly double with age, wrapped in a tattered, dust-colored shawl that smelled of ancient tombs. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes were a piercing, unblinking, predatory gray. "Seek not to match the gods, child," the crone whispered. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping across a grave. "Be content to be the best among mortals. Ask the goddess for forgiveness for your boastful words. She is wise, she is merciful, she may yet spare you." Arachne laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound that cut through the tension like a knife. "I do not need the advice of the withered and the weak," she spat. "I have worked for my glory. If the goddess is as wise as they say, let her face me. Or does she only send her shadows to do her fighting for her?" The old woman didn't move, but her shadow began to grow. It stretched across the floor, up the walls, over the ceiling, until the entire workshop was swallowed in darkness. The Empress began to weave. Her fingers moved so fast that they became a blur of color and motion. She wove the sea and its endless waves. She wove the sky and its cloudless expanse. She wove the land of Greece, its rivers and mountains, its sprawling cities, and its untold wealth. The rags fell away in a burst of blinding light. The cane became a spear of polished bronze. The bent spine straightened, growing and growing, until the head of the goddess brushed against the rafters. Athena stood in the workshop, no longer a teacher, no longer a guide. She was a mountain of armor and ego. "The contest is accepted," she said. And as the villagers fled into the streets, the two women sat down to their looms, and the world began to unravel. There is a specific kind of silence that exists only when a god and a mortal share the same air. It is not the silence of peace. It is the vacuum of space, the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, the stillness of the air before a lightning strike. In that small, dust-filled workshop in Lydia, the world stopped spinning. The apprentices, the villagers, even the mountain nymphs who had gathered to watch, they became like stone. No one breathed, no one moved. Only the shuttles. Thump, clack, thump, clack. This was more than a contest of skill. It was a clash of two fundamentally different realities. On one side stood Athena, the goddess of wisdom, a being who wove not just with silk, but with the very laws of the universe. Her loom was a machine of divine propaganda. As her fingers flew, she wove the 12 great Olympians in all their terrifying symmetrical glory. She wove Zeus on his throne of clouds, Hera in her velvet robes, Poseidon commanding the tides. But look at the corners of her work. Athena wove a warning. She depicted the 4 contests, 4 ancient stories of mortals who dared to challenge the gods and were crushed for it. She wove the mother of the pygmies turned into a crane. She wove Antigone turned into a stork. Athena's Tapestry was a law book written in gold. It was a message to Arachne. This is the order of things. We are the masters. You are the dirt. Do not forget your place. But across the room, Arachne was weaving a revolution. She did not look at the goddess's warnings. She did not look at the looming threat of the bronze spear leaning against the wall. Her eyes were fixed on her own thread. If Athena was weaving the ideal, Arachne was weaving the real. She wove 21 scenes of divine betrayal. She wove the story of Europa, the innocent girl tricked by Zeus in the form of a bull. She didn't weave the bull as a majestic god. She wove it as a beast of deception. She wove the heartbreak in Europa's eyes as the shore of her home faded into the mist. She wove Leda and the swan. She wove Danae in her tower of gold. She wove the gods not as protectors, but as predators, as shapeshifters who used their power to take whatever they wanted and leave a trail of broken lives in their wake. Arachne's Tapestry was a museum of the gods' crimes. It was the first time in history that a human being used art to put the heavens on trial. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the workshop floor. Both women stopped. The shuttles fell silent. The rhythmic thump-clack that had filled the day was replaced by the sound of the wind whistling through the rafters. And then, the most terrifying moment in the myth occurs. Athena, the inventor of the loom, the goddess of all crafts, stepped forward to judge the mortal's work. She searched for a flaw. She looked for a mismatched color, a loose thread, a crooked line. She looked for any reason to call Arachne inferior. And she found nothing. The Roman poet Ovid tells us, not even envy could find a flaw in the work. In that moment, the hierarchy of the universe shattered. A mortal had reached the ceiling of heaven. A human born of dust and dye had achieved perfection without a god's help. And in that moment, the goddess of wisdom ceased to be wise. She became a monster. Athena did not argue. She did not debate. She reacted with the primal rage of a cornered animal. With a single violent motion, she reached out and tore Arachne's tapestry from top to bottom. She shredded the evidence of her father's crimes. She ripped the silk that had taken a lifetime of skill to master. But she wasn't done. She took the wooden shuttle from the loom, the very tool of Arachne's genius, and she struck the girl. Once, twice, 3 times. She beat the girl down until Arachne lay huddled in the dirt, her mind shattered, her art destroyed, her pride turned into a wound that would never heal. Athena didn't want to win a contest. She wanted to erase the very idea that a mortal could be her equal.
Arachne was not like Medusa. She was not a victim of circumstance. She was a victim of her own brilliance. The shame of being beaten by a petty god, the horror of seeing the truth shredded on the floor, it was too much. In the dark of the workshop, while the goddess watched with cold, unblinking eyes, Arachne took a cord of silk. She fashioned a noose. She chose to die on her own terms, rather than live in a world where her truth was a crime. She kicked the stool away, and for a moment there was only the swinging of the rope. But the goddess was not done with her. Stay with us, because the transformation that comes next is the stuff of nightmares.
Death is often called the ultimate escape. For Arachne, standing at the edge of the abyss was a choice of dignity. She had seen the face of wisdom, and she had found it ugly. She had seen her truth shredded into rags, and she refused to breathe the same air as the goddess who had destroyed it. But Athena does not believe in escapes. The daughter of Zeus looked up at the hanging form of the girl who had outwoven her. She didn't feel pity. She didn't feel regret. She felt a cold, lingering spite that reached beyond the grave. She reached out a hand, not to cut the rope and save the girl's life, but to bind her to that rope forever. "Live on," Athena whispered. Her voice sounded like the scraping of a shovel against frozen earth. "Live on, wicked girl, but hang forever, and let this punishment be passed down to your children and your children's children until the end of time." Then came the mercy of the goddess. Athena sprinkled Arachne with the juices of Hecate's herb, a bitter, transformative poison brewed from the darkness of the underworld. The reaction was instantaneous and horrific. We talk about Medusa's snakes, but Arachne's fate was a slow-motion nightmare of biology. Her hair fell away in dry clumps. Her nose and ears dissolved back into her skull. Her skin began to turn a mottled, earthy gray, toughening into a shell. Her arms and legs didn't just shrink, they multiplied. They sprouted from her ribs like jagged, hairy thorns, twitching, searching for a ground that was no longer there. Her eyes, those human eyes that had seen the crimes of the gods, split and multiplied, turning into 8 cold, unblinking black beads that could no longer weep. She was no longer a woman. She was a stomach and a spinneret. She was a creature reduced to the singular task she loved most, but stripped of the beauty that made it art. She was the first spider. And as she scurried into the dark, rotting corners of the rafters, fleeing the light of the goddess, she realized the true weight of the curse. She could still weave, but she would never again have a voice. Her masterpieces would no longer be windows to the truth. They would be invisible traps, destined to be swept away by the hands of those who feared her. In the 2026 lens of power, we have to ask, why? Why this specific, grotesque punishment? The answer is chilling. Athena didn't just want to punish Arachne, she wanted to devalue her. By turning her into a pest, a nuisance, a monster, Athena ensured that no one would ever look at a spider's web and see a protest against the gods. They would only see something to be crushed. This is the final stage of divine cancellation. It's not enough to kill the dissenter. You must make the dissenter repulsive. You must make sure that even if they tell the truth, no one wants to hear it. But did Athena truly win? Every morning, in every dark corner of every home in the world, a spider wakes, and she begins to weave. She produces a design so mathematically perfect, so structurally sound, that modern engineers still struggle to replicate its strength. Every web is a silent monument. Every silk strand is a reminder that excellence cannot be killed. It can only be relocated. Arachne's legacy isn't in the grand white temples of Athens. It's in the quiet places. It's in the persistence of the artist who creates even when the world refuses to look. Arachne remains the patron saint of the silenced, the genius in the shadows. and she is the proof that even a god's rage cannot stop a master from practicing their craft. We have reached the end of the third chapter in our Tragic Villains series. We've seen how the gods use beauty as a weapon, how they use wisdom as a cage, and how they use power to shred the truth. But our list of 10 is only just beginning. Next, we move from the looms of Greece to the cold, lonely islands of the Mediterranean, where a witch named Circe is waiting to tell us why she turned men into swine. Was she a monster, or was she just a woman who learned the hard way that in a world of gods, you are either the predator or the prey?
Who is the real villain of this story? Athena, or the girl who dared to be better? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And remember, the next time you see a spider in the corner of your room, look closer at the web. She's still trying to tell you the truth. This is Timeless Tales.